Hey guys, tonight we're staying up way past bedtime, venturing deep into the forgotten architecture of Northwood High. You know the place, that looming brick monolith built back in '58, where the fluorescent lights hum louder than the students, and the shadows in the gym look like they hold their own memories. We're talking about the part of the school everyone ignores, the literal foundation where the boilers cough and the pipes weep quietly into the concrete. Specifically, we're looking for the staircase down to the utility basement, the one local legend says never ends if you count the steps as you descend. It's an old trick, maybe a piece of psychological folklore, but tonight we test the physics of fear. The air here is already thick and cold, even though the summer heat should be trapped in these classrooms. I can hear the faint, high-pitched ringing of an unused intercom line above me, the ghost of an administrator calling roll. This is the real midnight hallways experience, far from the polished main entrance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tonight is going to demand a certain kind of patience, a quiet watchfulness. I've brought just my small, focused beam flashlight, mostly relying on the sickly green glow escaping the emergency exit signs and the faint, persistent moonlight filtering through the dusty upper windows of the C-Wing. I feel that familiar, settling weight of isolation that only a truly empty institutional building can provide. The entire building is holding its breath. Now, dim the lights, maybe crack open a window for that midnight breeze, and let's walk the halls together. I move slowly, my sneakers making almost no sound on the waxed linoleum. The C-Wing, where home economics and vocational tech used to be, is notoriously dark. It's always been slated for demolition, perpetually smelling of ozone, old sewing machine oil, and just the faintest trace of sulfur, probably from the ancient chemistry lab down the hall. My realistic anchor tonight is the building blueprint I managed to grab from the facilities office archives. Northwood High has 4 designated levels: ground, first floor, second floor, and the annex, the old auditorium. The blueprint clearly shows only one actual sublevel, the mechanical utility basement, accessible by a single, standard cinder block stairwell near the loading dock. It's supposed to be exactly 23 steps down to the landing. A short drop, mostly used for maintenance access to the heating core and main water cutoff. Yet, the story persists, the mythic element here, that if you count the steps out loud, slowly, deliberately, the stairwell somehow lengthens itself, refusing to deposit you on the basement floor until the count stops, or perhaps until something else stops you. I find the door exactly where the map indicated, tucked behind a long row of decommissioned metal lockers, their doors dented and their paint flaking like dry skin. The door itself is thick, gray steel, visibly older than the rest of the wing, marked with a red, faded B1 stencil. It has a heavy, rusted firebar that clicks with alarming loudness when I push it down. The sound echoes back at me from the empty corridor, a sudden, metallic declaration of my presence. I pause, listening. Nothing responds but the steady thrum of the high school's distant, automated air handler, a sound that only serves to deepen the quiet. The smell hits me immediately. Damp, cold earth and something metallic, like old pennies in furnace exhaust. The air doesn't feel like the rest of the school. It feels heavier, resistant. I shine my flashlight down. It's a classic, purely functional stairwell. Poured concrete steps, a simple metal railing bolted to the wall, and high up, a single bare bulb behind a wire cage. The bulb is thankfully lit, but it throws a weak, trembling yellow light, failing to reach the floor below, which is lost in shadow. I step onto the first step. The concrete is gritty under my shoe. I steady myself on the cold, rough metal of the railing. I take a deep breath, recognizing this specific flavor of fear, the anticipation that comes right before crossing a threshold you might not be able to uncross. It's a choice to descend, and I commit to it now. I decide my count starts immediately, slow and steady, matching my deliberate pace. 1. The sound of my own voice is surprisingly loud in the confined space. The step feels solid. The wall next to me is damp, smelling faintly of mildew. 2. I notice a dark smudge on the wall near the rail. It looks like old grease, or maybe just dirt. 3. My light beam shakes slightly. I focus on the geometry of the space. It's just a standard stairwell. 23 steps. I should be able to see the floor now, or at least the landing. But the shadows below seem to have absorbed the weak ceiling light entirely. The faint humming from the main school is already muffled, replaced by the deep, resonant drone of the basement itself, a vibration I feel more in my chest than I hear with my ears. 4. The step creaks slightly. Concrete isn't supposed to creak. It's supposed to be absolute, unyielding. 5. I realize I'm gripping the railing so tightly my fingers are aching. I force myself to relax, to maintain this slow, measured descent. I am focusing intensely on the counting, not letting my mind wander to what might be waiting. 6. I look back up quickly, checking the fire door above me. It looks far away already, a bright, inviting rectangle of normal light. 6 steps shouldn't create this much distance. I check my count against my pace. Everything is standard, yet the descent feels prolonged, stretched. 7. The air temperature drops drastically. It's not just cool now. It's aggressively cold, the kind of cold that seems to stick to your bones and slow your heart rate. The bare bulb above flickers once, a hard, sharp blink, before settling back into its shaky yellow glow. 8. I think some lessons were never meant to be taught. 9. I look down again. Still no landing. Still only the blackness below. I consciously shift my weight, trying to gauge how many more steps I feel I have left, ignoring the blueprint's 23. It feels like at least another 20. This is the moment when the rational mind starts to bargain with the impossible. I am certain I have descended more than a third of the required 23 steps, but the visual distance remains unchanged. The air is now quiet save for my heavy breathing and the rhythmic, hollow sound of my voice. The promise of the myth is already subtly manifesting, not in overt terror, but in the sickening displacement of predictable space. I press on, maintaining the ritual of the count. I must reach a number that confirms the impossible before I stop. 10. The descent continues, each step demanding more effort than the last, not physically, but psychically. The cold isn't just external now. It feels like it's radiating up from the concrete itself, a chill that implies immense, undisturbed depth. I am now well past the halfway mark of the known stairwell length, theoretically standing at step 10 of 23, but the geometry is utterly betraying me. I should be seeing the landing, the gray floor where the main boiler room opens up. Instead, I see the light from the caged bulb above diminishing rapidly, struggling to pierce the gloom that is pooling below. The air is stagnant, heavy, tasting like rust and silence. 11. My foot lands on the next step. It sounds different, a dull, choked thud instead of the previous gritty scuff. I check the step with my light. It looks identical to the one before, same gray concrete, same chipped edge. But the auditory feedback is wrong. It feels like the material is denser, or perhaps I'm simply listening too closely, hyper-aware of every minute alteration. The sound of my count, however, remains crisp and clear, rebounding slightly off the confined walls, the only true anchor I have in this deepening void. 12. I pause here. I force myself to stop moving, to simply stand on the step and shine my light around the immediate area. The architectural details are textbook utilitarian. Exposed water pipes run vertically down the wall beside the railing, thick with condensation, occasionally dripping a slow, heavy drop that makes a disproportionately loud plink somewhere far below. I note the paint, a sickly, pale institutional green that looks almost black in the poor light. I am looking for anomalies, for something that confirms a loop or an extension. The factual anchor I need right now is the number 23. If I pass 23 and the stairwell continues, the local legend is proven true, and I have entered something that adheres to a non-Euclidean geometry. I find myself fighting an internal battle, a scientific resistance to the magical premise of the situation. I lean in, placing my cheek close to the cold, painted wall. I hear the distant, faint thrum of the school building, a sound that is now significantly attenuated, like listening to a heartbeat through a thick sheet of lead. 13. The step is colder than the others. I swear the metal railing hummed faintly as my hand gripped it, a low, metallic vibration that ceased the moment I consciously registered it. I try to dismiss it as residual boiler noise, but the boiler room should be close, and this sound feels structural, inherent to the steps themselves. 14. This step has a crack running diagonally across it, a thin hairline fracture that catches my flashlight perfectly. I remember seeing a crack like that higher up, maybe near step 4 or 5. I try to recall the exact pattern. Was it this step? Did I miss it before? Or is this stairwell starting to fold back on itself? The terror is insidious. It doesn't slam the door. It just slightly shifts the scenery so you doubt your own memory. 15. The air pressure feels higher, pressing down slightly on my ears. I swallow hard to pop them, but the sensation persists. I am counting slowly, enunciating each number clearly, focusing all my energy on maintaining the ritual. 16. I look up again. The rectangle of the doorway is now just a distant, weak square of yellowish light, high above me, reachable only if I were to climb another dozen or so steps back up. The distance is impossible. I have only counted 16 steps. The ceiling light is completely invisible, swallowed by the curve of the stairwell above. I am now encased in this perpetual twilight, illuminated only by my focused flashlight beam, which carves a small, dusty tunnel out of the surrounding blackness. The supernatural element is now undeniable. The space is actively responding to the count. It is drawing itself out, adding unseen material beneath my feet as I request it through the rhythm of my voice. 17. I stop breathing for a moment, listening only to the drip, drip, drip of the condensation somewhere below. I think about the old campus rumors, about the custodian who supposedly went down here in the 70s to check the floodgate during a massive storm and was never seen again. They found his clipboard and his keys on the 23rd step, but the man himself was gone. At the time, they blamed the rushing water, but now, standing here, I feel like the architecture itself ate him. 18. I think some lessons were never meant to be taught. 19. I step down and my foot brushes against something soft and yielding on the step. I freeze, shining the light down immediately. It's a small, sodden piece of paper stuck fast to the concrete. I peel it off carefully. It's wet and brittle, the ink badly bled, but I can make out the corner of a student ID photo and a partial date, 1974. A small, black and white fragment of a young man's face, frozen in a nervous high school portrait smile. The same year as the missing custodian. The terror spikes, not because of a ghost, but because this artifact proves that someone else came down here, past the known limits, and whatever happened to them, they left this piece of themselves behind, far deeper than 23 steps. I fold the paper fragment and put it securely in my jacket pocket. I need to keep moving. Stopping here feels like waiting to be assimilated by the silence. 20. I am fighting the urge to stop counting and simply run, either up or down. But I know if I stop, the effect might freeze me here, suspended in the middle of a perpetual descent, never reaching the bottom or the top. The rules of the legend must be obeyed. Count and descend. 21. The sound of my voice is starting to feel detached, as if the words are coming from someone slightly ahead of me, or perhaps slightly behind. The air is so thick it feels like it is catching the sound and holding it hostage. I am nearing the blueprint limit. I prepare myself for the moment of confirmation. 22. I can no longer see the opening above. I am completely submerged in the basement environment. The ceiling light is gone. All I have is the focused white disk of my flashlight beam, cutting into the darkness. I can feel the rhythm of my heart hammering against my ribs, synchronizing with the slow, deliberate pace of the count. The next step is the one that matters. 23. Word count, 1297. Section 3. I pause again, flashlight fixed on the concrete step below me, the one that should mark the landing. It is step 23. I inhale deeply, trying to gather the cold, musty air into my lungs. My entire body is tense, awaiting the solid ground that should logically be here. My factual anchor, the school blueprint, is now hanging in the balance. 23. My foot lands. It is a step. It is not a landing. The concrete is cold, grittier than the last, and utterly, impossibly, identical to the 22 steps that preceded it. I shine the beam forward and down. The stairwell continues. It curves slightly, maintaining the same oppressive, utilitarian architecture, gray cinder block walls, thin metal railing, and relentless concrete. The darkness below is absolute, devouring the edges of my light cone. The legend is true. The number acts as a command, not a measure. The stairwell is functionally infinite, or at least, responsive to the intent of the descent. The psychological shift is profound. I am no longer exploring a building. I am trapped within a kinetic myth. I force myself to maintain composure. I need to confirm the looping or extending mechanism. The artifact I need is the hairline crack I noticed earlier, or maybe the specific stain of old grease. I start counting again immediately, forcing the rhythm to continue, scared of what might happen if the sequence breaks. 24. 25. I am watching the wall intently now. I look for any change in the paint, any chip, any scratch mark that I can definitively remember from the first cycle. I realize how difficult this is in the monochromatic, low-light environment. The architecture is designed to be anonymous, forgettable, and functional, the perfect camouflage for a spatial anomaly. 26. The air is still dense, but now I detect a different odor mixed in with the mold and rust, the sharp, acrid scent of ozone, like electricity burning. I lift my light and sweep the beam up the wall, looking for exposed wiring or signs of arcing. Nothing. The sound of my own counting voice is now the loudest thing in the abyss. 27. My memory snaps back to the previous descent. Step 14 had that distinct, diagonal hairline fracture. I need to confirm if that fracture repeats on step 23 plus 14 equals step 37. The thought process, the imposition of arithmetic and geometry onto the supernatural. is the only thing keeping the panic at bay. 28. I look down at my shadow, which stretches out long and distorted beneath my focused light. It is unnaturally crisp against the dull concrete. For a moment, my reflection in the polished surface of the step seems to linger slightly after I move my head, a small, dark echo following my motion. I quickly shake the thought away. It's just the low angle of the light and dust motes. 29. I think some lessons were never meant to be taught. 30. I am physically exhausted now, despite only descending what should be the distance of a couple of flights. The cold and the psychological strain are draining my energy. The metal railing is freezing beneath my palm, and I feel a tingling ache starting in my wrists. I keep my focus on the number, the ritual. 31. I hear a sound. It is subtle, almost lost in the environmental humming, but distinct. It is the soft squeak of a rubber sole on linoleum. It comes from above, but not directly above me. It sounds like it's emanating from the wall, far off and muffled, like someone walking briskly down the second-floor hallway, maybe heading toward the auditorium wing. The school is supposed to be empty. Locked. 32. The squeaking stops. The silence that follows is heavy, expectant. The supernatural element is becoming aggressive, bringing elements of the upper school down into this sub-level reality. Are the sounds being dragged down by the staircase's pull? 33. I am watching the steps ahead, maintaining the cadence. I am past the number 23, and the stairwell still has the same visual depth, the same oppressive atmosphere. I check my watch. I have been descending for 17 minutes. If these were standard steps, I should have been at the landing in 90 seconds. 34. I notice something. A small, dark mark near the corner of the step, right where the concrete meets the wall. It's a scratch, deep enough to expose the gray aggregate beneath the surface layer. I am absolutely certain I saw this exact scratch before, high up, maybe around step 7. 35. I stop and press my fingers against the wall, trying to feel for a seam, a joint, a logical point where the architecture might have shifted. The wall is continuous, rough cinder block, cold and damp. The only discontinuity is the relentless, unbroken line of the stairwell itself. 36. Almost there. I need to hit 37 to confirm the full repetition of the diagonal crack. If the environment is looping every 23 steps, I should be back to the initial starting point of the anomalies. Just push 23 steps lower into the earth. 37. I step down and immediately shine my light onto the step. There it is. The diagonal hairline fracture, unmistakable, catching the light like a fine, dusty silver thread running from the corner to the center of the step. It is the exact same crack I saw near the beginning. The loop is confirmed. The staircase isn't just extending. It is repeating a sequence of 23 steps, embedding me deeper with every iteration, and the only way to activate the loop is the count itself. I feel a strange, cold satisfaction mixed with utter dread. I now understand the mechanism of my entrapment. I have successfully used the method of descent to verify its own endlessness. I am walking a Mobius strip built into the foundation of Northwood High. I have to keep counting. If I stop, I might stop the cycle, but where will I land? 38. I begin the next cycle, pushing past the dread. I have descended nearly twice the height of the entire school building, yet I am still in the exact same physical segment of the stairwell. The scent of ozone is stronger now, almost metallic and sparking. I wonder what lies beneath the point where the loop breaks, if it ever does. Maybe the basement isn't the bottom. Maybe the bottom is just the number where you finally stop counting, and the loop releases you into whatever space it has built for you. I maintain the descent, forcing the numbers out, my voice growing slightly hoarse. I am beginning the third cycle of 23 steps, consciously aware that every time I hit a step divisible by 23, I am entering a new layer of the same old stairwell segment. The realization hasn't lessened the terror. It has formalized it, transforming a vague fear of the dark into the precise dread of systemic, nonlinear architecture. 46. This is the second threshold. I step down, and the environment responds with a low, deep structural groan that seems to originate from the foundations of the entire building. It's not a creak. It's the sound of immense, settled weight shifting, perhaps the sound of the concrete stretching itself to accommodate the new segment. 47. I am watching for the marker from the very first steps, the initial dark smudge of grease on the wall, which should now appear around step 48 or 49. The cold is relentless. My breath plumes visibly in the limited beam of my flashlight. I feel sweat condensing on my back despite the freezing temperature. The physical exertion of descending steps that do not exist is immense. 48. I brush the wall with my hand, relying on touch now as much as sight. The paint is thick and cold. I feel a slight stickiness, the texture of old, dried grease, exactly where I remember it from the first cycle. I am trapped in a repeating geometry, but the repetitions are layered, each descent pushing me farther from the surface. 49. The ambient noise is starting to change again. The distant, faint thrum of the high school is now heavily distorted. It sounds less like a machine and more like a muffled, rhythmic heartbeat, or perhaps a slow, heavy, repeated knock deep within the walls. It doesn't sound mechanical anymore. It sounds biological and immense. 50. My head is starting to swim. I attribute it to the lack of fresh air and the intense focus required to maintain the count. I try to pull a memory of the world above, the glowing exit sign, the smell of the cafeteria oven cleaner, but the memory feels weak, distant, like a broadcast from a broken radio tower. 51. I think some lessons were never meant to be taught. 52. The supernatural element escalates. As my foot lands, I hear a faint whisper. It is too soft to discern the words, but the cadence is distinctly human, right beside my ear. It is cold, close, and undeniably present. I stop dead, my heart seizing in my chest. I swing the flashlight beam around wildly, sweeping the walls and the ceiling above. Nothing, just the endless concrete and the freezing air. The whisper is gone, leaving only the sound of my own ragged breathing. 53. I try to rationalize the whisper as an auditory hallucination caused by the extreme pressure or the oxygen deprivation, but the sheer clarity of the sound rejects that explanation. It was intimate, intended just for me. I realize that the space isn't empty. It's listening to the count, and perhaps, now that I have penetrated to this depth, it is beginning to speak back. 54. I notice a change in the light. The focused beam of my flashlight, which was pure white, now seems to possess a subtle, unstable yellow tint, like the light is struggling to maintain its true color in this environment. I check the battery indicator. It's green, full power. It's the space warping the light, not the tool. 55. I descend slower now, more cautious. I realize the repetition isn't perfect. While the architectural markers are the same, the grease smudge, the crack, the ambient conditions are degrading with each cycle. The deeper I go, the colder the air, the heavier the silence, and the more aggressive the subtle psychological assaults become. 56. I stop to examine the wall again. My factual anchor shifts to the composition of the structure itself. I know Northwood High was built using post-war concrete, easily chipped, mixed with local river aggregate. But the concrete here, 56 steps down, looks and feels denser, darker, almost metallic. I scrape my finger along the surface, and it leaves no dust, only a faint, silver streak where the flashlight beam hits. 57. I wonder about the folklore of the builders. Did they know? Did they incorporate this feature deliberately? The rumor among the older faculty was that the original construction foreman disappeared during the laying of the foundation, but that's just common ghost story filler. Now, I suspect the foreman didn't run. He just started counting the depths of the excavation. 58. Another auditory event, but this time, it's not a whisper. It's a dragging sound, wet and heavy, coming from directly below me, where the darkness is most complete. It sounds like a sack of saturated sand being hauled across rough concrete. It pauses, and then resumes, rhythmic and agonizingly slow. It is approaching the edge of my light cone. 59. I force myself to step down again, maintaining the count. I cannot stop. I must understand what is responding to the ritual. The terror is now fully formed. I am encountering something that is actively occupying the space I am creating for myself through the enumeration. 60. The dragging stops precisely at the edge of the light. I cannot see it. I only hear the wet, labored breathing, just at the periphery of my visibility, obscured by the dust and the distortion of the air. It smells strongly of stagnant water and something sharply chemical, like industrial bleach mixed with decaying meat. I raise my light, trembling slightly, ready to face whatever the loop has deposited down here to greet me. I have broken through the simple architectural anomaly and entered something genuinely malignant. I stand on step 60, frozen, my flashlight beam vibrating slightly with the tremor in my hand. The dragging sound is replaced by the shallow, wet gasping, just beyond the sphere of my light. I know that if I descend one more step, I might physically enter the space occupied by whatever is down there. I am in the domain of the loop's consequence. I force myself to breathe, the cold air scraping my throat. I cannot see it, but I can feel its weight in the air, the intense focus of its attention. The smell is overwhelming now, a visceral mix of decay and chemical runoff. This is what the endless descent creates, a waiting room for whatever failed to make it back to the surface. I begin the next count, deliberately louder, asserting my presence and the power of the ritual. 61. My foot lands. Nothing attacks. The breathing remains, static, observing. But the sheer silence of the rest of the stairwell is broken by a sudden, loud sound from far above, a metallic clang and the rattle of a chain. It sounds exactly like a locker door being violently slammed shut on the second floor. The auditory hallucination, or transmission, is growing more intense, more localized. 62. I think some lessons were never meant to be taught. 63. I am in the fourth iteration of the staircase now. I continue my visual check for the specific markers, the grease, the crack, but they seem somehow muted, the concrete texture smoothed slightly, as if the loop itself is wearing down the details with each repetition. 64. The whispering returns. It's no longer a vague breath, but a defined voice, low and gravelly, muttering indistinct, rapid phrases. It seems to be coming from the junction where the railing meets the wall, vibrating through the cold metal I'm gripping. I quickly pull my hand away, the sudden cold touch seeming predatory. 65. I focus the light down into the blackness where the breathing thing waits. I see nothing but dust motes dancing in the beam. The supernatural element is playing with my senses, making the unseen feel more dangerous than the visible. 66. My factual anchor centers on the nature of basements in these older schools. They were often constructed hastily, designed to be forgotten, utilitarian spaces for the ugly machinery of infrastructure. This structural indifference makes them perfect hosts for something that requires only space and neglect to manifest. The school didn't become haunted. It was built on a principle of absence. 67. I noticed that the metal railing has begun to exhibit a fine layer of rust that wasn't there on the previous cycles. It's too fast, too fresh. It suggests an accelerated corrosion, perhaps caused by the strange, acrid atmosphere. Or maybe the material itself is decaying faster the deeper I descend. 68. The breathing below suddenly intensifies, becoming a series of short, wet coughs. And then, a sound that chills me to my core. A single, distinct squeak of a shoe. It's the same sound I heard earlier, the rubber on linoleum. But this time it's coming from the darkness below me, right at the bottom of the current step. Whatever is down there is moving. It has feet. 69. I have to move. I cannot stay suspended on this step, waiting for the unseen entity to claw its way into the light. The only way out is through, or rather, deeper in. I step down hard, expecting to hit something organic, but my foot finds only the solid, unyielding concrete. 70. The thing below reacts immediately. A loud, sharp rattle, like a chain dragged rapidly over stone. It is moving away, retreating into the deeper shadows as soon as I assert myself with the count. It confirms that the ritual of counting, the descent itself, is what gives me agency here. As long as I maintain the count, I am defining the space. If I stop, the space defines me. 71. I hear a faint, distorted sound echoing through the stairwell walls. It sounds like children laughing, high and shrill, but warped, slowed down, almost like a recording played underwater. It's the phantom noise of Northwood High's past, dragged down into this infinite well. 72. The air pressure feels crushing. I feel a sharp, stabbing pain behind my left eye. My sense of balance is wavering. I briefly close my eyes, trying to recenter myself, before forcing them open again. I must focus on the rhythm. 73. I notice a small detail on the wall, near the 73rd step, which corresponds to the 4th step of the new cycle. The cinder block has been scored deeply, almost carved, by something sharp. It's too low to be casual graffiti. It's a series of tally marks. They are scratched in deep, irregular lines, almost frantic. I count them quickly. There are 23 marks, grouped and crossed out. They represent one full cycle of the stairwell. 74. The realization hits me like a physical blow. Someone else came down here and recorded the loop. The custodian from the 70s, perhaps, or another curious soul who found the secret of the infinite count. And they left this record, not as a warning, but perhaps as a desperate, final piece of evidence. I am not the first to be trapped in this geometry. 75. I think about the psychological state of the person who carved those tallies. They knew they were repeating, knew they were descending without end. Did they stop counting? And if so, what released them? The silence surrounding me is now absolute again, but it feels malevolent, filled with potential energy. I realize I am racing toward step 92, the next threshold, and I dread what new layer of reality that number will unveil. I am deep into the 5th cycle now, the numbers spilling out automatically, devoid of true meaning, yet saturated with terrible power. My throat is dry, my voice raw, and the flashlight beam is sputtering slightly, fighting the crushing atmospheric density of this engineered abyss. I am approaching the 4th iteration of the boundary, step 92, and the internal dread has reached a point of icy stillness. Panic is gone, replaced by a terrible, clear-eyed focus on the next number. 89. The ambient sound shifts dramatically. The deep, heavy heartbeat or knocking that characterized the deeper levels is now gone, replaced by a sound I instantly recognize: the high-pitched, insistent buzz of a broken fluorescent light fixture, the kind you hear right before it finally gives out, constantly on the verge of silence. It is exactly the sound that permeates the empty halls of Northwood High. Except here, it's deafening, vibrating through the concrete. 90. I realize that the staircase isn't just taking me deeper into the earth. It's pulling the entire school down around me, collapsing the upper reality into the basement dimension, one segment at a time. The buzzing sound is the sound of the entire second floor existing right here, pressed against the walls of the stairwell. 91. My feet are leaden. My vision tunnels slightly. I have descended the equivalent of nearly 5 high school buildings stacked vertically, all while remaining in the same 23-step segment. I am about to cross the threshold into the truly unknown. 92. I step down. The sound stops. The fluorescent buzzing cuts out instantly, replaced by a single, sharp, metallic screech that cuts across the silence. It sounds like chalk dragging across an immense blackboard, the sound amplified and distorted to a painful pitch. I clamp my hands over my ears instinctively, stumbling on the step. When the noise finally fades, the air is still, but the light is different. I look up, far above, where the ceiling should be obscured by the curve of the stairwell. A faint, impossible light source has appeared. It's not the yellow rectangle of the exterior door. It is a flickering, pulsing light projecting downward, and it is blue. A projector glow. 93. I look down, and the architecture has changed. The cinder blocks are no longer continuous. The wall is patched, made up of differing shades of institutional green, and tacked onto the concrete near the railing is a small, rectangular piece of faded white paper. I shine my light on it. It's a fire safety instruction sheet, stained yellow with age, listing assembly points on the football field. It belongs on the first floor, near the main office. The loop isn't just repeating the steps. It's stitching together layers of the school's past and present, dragging artifacts and sensory details down with me. 94. The metallic railing is gone. It has been replaced by a heavy wooden banister, dark oak, cold and smooth beneath my touch. The wood is slightly tacky, smelling faintly of old varnish and dust, a detail pulled from the forgotten staff library stairwell, located in the original 1958 wing. I am descending a composite staircase, constructed of every single vertical descent in Northwood High's history, assembled one step at a time. 95. The scratching returns. Not the tally marks, but the physical scratching of something sharp against the stone, close by, coming from the shadowed recess beneath the step above me. It is frantic, desperate, echoing the sounds I heard in the 40-step range. The thing that waits in the darkness is still here, or perhaps it is always here. 96. I think some lessons were never meant to be taught. 97. I must break the count. The purpose of this descent wasn't to reach the bottom, because the bottom is functionally impossible. The purpose was to understand the mechanism, and the mechanism is driven by the count. The true terror is realizing the count creates the stairs. It does not merely measure them. If I continue, I will simply build an infinite prison for myself. The logical, factual decision is to stop the ritual, regardless of the consequences the legend implies. I take the next step. I do not speak. My foot lands silently on the concrete step. I stop moving. The entire stairwell goes absolutely silent. The buzzing is gone. The projection light vanishes. The air feels suddenly weightless, almost thin. I am standing on the 97th step. I stand motionless for a full 30 seconds, flashlight fixed forward. The darkness below is still there, but it feels less like an active void and more like simple, absolute depth. Then I hear it. Not a sound from the school, or a whisper, or a cough. It is the rhythmic, mechanical tick-tick-tick of an old, oversized clock, the kind that used to hang in the principal's office, counting the passing of empty time. It is directly ahead of me. I move my flashlight down, slowly, expecting the edge of the landing. The beam hits not the floor, but a wall. A bare, gray cinder block wall, perfectly flat, blocking the descent. The staircase has simply ended. It ends abruptly at step 97, sealed off, blocked by a newly formed wall of concrete that must have formed the moment I broke the ritual. I am trapped on the 97th step, a flight of stairs that leads to nowhere. The clock is ticking on the other side of the fresh, unpainted cinder block, counting down to whatever happens when the time runs out. I am suspended here, 97 steps below Northwood High, encased in the structural nightmare I built with my own voice. I turn, slowly, looking up at the long, impossible climb back toward the faint, distant memory of the surface. The darkness is complete. The steps above me are no longer visible. The climb back up must be counted too. But what happens if I count up? I take a slow, deep breath, tasting the cold, metallic air one last time, knowing that the real journey is just beginning. I am the architect of my own basement. I don't remember the number where I stopped counting the ascent. Maybe I didn't stop. Maybe the upwards climb demands its own inverted ritual. All I know is the feeling of the rough cinder block under my fingers as I clawed my way back through the darkness, pulling myself through the repeating, corrosive layers of cold air and stagnant silence. The only sound now is the low, steady hum of the emergency lights back in the sea wing, a weak, reddish-orange that throws impossibly long shadows across the linoleum. I am standing near the fire door, which is now closed, the heavy metal bar cool beneath my palm. I never heard the click of the lock securing itself. It was simply closed when I arrived. The air here on the ground floor smells of stale cleaning fluid and the faint, sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine that drifts in through a high window. The school is quiet again. The vast, echoing silence returned to its proper, unnerving equilibrium. I can hear the gentle rush of wind moving through the space between the lockers, causing a single piece of forgotten paper